All right, part two. I didn't expect to go two parts, but we went two parts. So this is part two of our discussion, our open discussion on race. Again, I promise you guys, I'll get to more of your questions this time. I had a lot to say, a lot I was feeling, and so I promise you guys I'll get to the questions, more of your questions. Hold on, let me get Julian in here, and then we'll continue off, and I'll let him make his point. Where is he at? He should be in here. I'll let him make his point because it was a good point. But I hope you guys, again, I'm a proud black man. I have amazing white friends, family. I have no hatred in my bone for anyone. I really think it's important that we have these discussions. I truly feel that's the only way we come together as one, and provide the kind of living atmosphere our great grandchildren deserve. So that is my goal. It's not to make you feel guilty. It's not make you feel bad. It's not make you feel ashamed. The goal for me is to help everyone understand, because the more people who can understand this, I think when you hear it in a very in a relaxed way, whether you're at the store or at a family get together, you can maybe educate someone and help the fight get to where it needs to get to, or help us get to a place where we should deserve to be at. Jay?
Definitely.
Go ahead, man.
Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead and finish what you wanted to say. Now we've
Okay,
got an
cool.
hour.
So really quickly, and then I'll touch on politics real quick and some interesting stuff, because we have an international crowd here. And if some folks from Switzerland are in the house, I want you guys to tell me if I'm wrong when I get to that point. So 1492, right? All of us in America are taught about 1492 because that's when Columbus so-called discovered America and really set this whole firestorm off, right? So what was really significant about 1492 is that from 711 until 1492, the Moors occupied Spain, right? And the Moors were black. They were Islamic and they were black. They looked probably more like me and TJ. But these guys and ladies, they conquered that area, and there's still the Moorish structures are still there in Spain. And at the time that they came there, there were a bunch of tribes. I think the Gauls, which are what we call the French now, the Gaul tribes sort of kind of ran that area, but it was very disorganized. So they came in and they brought agriculture, better agriculture, citrus, fruits, things of that nature. They also brought education and universities. So Islam brought in is all about learning and learning, through the religion, but they brought universities into that area, right? And at the time, that area was just agriculture. Most of Europe was illiterate because it was an agricultural society. You don't need to read. Matter of fact, if you look back into the history of Catholicism, it was only the priests who could read, and the Bible was in Latin, right? So they were the only people who could read, and it was hidden in Latin so that the common people couldn't do that. So anyway, from 711 to 1492, it was at the end of that time when Ferdinand and Isabella finally took the rest of Spain that was controlled by the Moors, and now you had the whole Spanish situation happening. Now, Christopher Columbus studied under the Moors and learned how to navigate the seas. Up until that time, English sailors only hugged the shore of the coast. They did not venture out into the ocean. And if you look at any histories of Christopher Columbus, or even if you read his diary, his own crew were scared when they couldn't see land anymore. They had no idea how he was navigating. He was navigating through the stars using Moorish education and technology. So none of that is ever explained. Everything, as far as we know in world history, starts in 1492, or at least, what we want to know. But we don't know how he even got to that point and came over here. And when he came over here, he met all sorts of people. There were Indians. There were already Africans here because they had been coming over across from the shores. And so I just wanted to point that 1492 thing out there because it just shows how there's two sides of the coin, and one side is shown, but the other side isn't. And obviously it was just a land grab. They used that technology to sail to new lands and claim them for the various crowns.
So one thing I want to add is I saw someone post, I'm going to guess it was a younger person. They said, I just wish it was 2019. Like, again, like the normalcy, and this is just a tough year. But, outside of COVID, that's a whole nother thing. But I'm happy we're having these discussions, and I don't see this as a lost year. Yeah, it's been a tough year, but sometimes you got to have these tough moments to move forward. I can tell you now that at least this opened up a big way for me to discuss not only with you, but with my own kids and my family. I'll tell you right now, I already told you guys I'm homeschooling my kids, and this was prior to everything. But I'll be honest. I shouldn't say I'll be honest, but I can tell you frankly, what they're going to learn is going to be a lot different. And I always intended to teach Black history. Let's get that straight. But it's going to be the focal point. Now, this is what they're going to know. And it takes moments like this and I hate to admit it, but for people like even me to really dive in. We are in a very distractive world. We all have ambitions and goals and things that pull us aside. But this is something that shouldn't be negotiable. This is something that we must know. And again, if you saw my last story live, that is why I put a lot of blame at our education system, because we're forced to learn all different types of math. We're forced to learn biology, chemistry, life science, but we're not forced to learn the truth about American history. And until we can look in the mirror and really have great moments of unification, then we're going to have these kind of issues.
Yeah. Hey, T, can I throw something in there really, really short?
Yeah, let's do it.
American history has always been about revolution. So when you have these sorts of protests, it's very ironic. And once again, it shows we can do certain things, but when you do it, it's wrong. The Boston Tea Party, which is really what kicked off the whole American Revolution, was literally a terrorist act. It was a terrorist act, and it was an act of insurrection against the crown. So you have that. You have the wholesale killing of all of the Native Americans who were here, and the savagery that happened there. But of course, when we grew up, like when you and I grew up, it was cowboys and Indians, right? And it was about, the cowboys were the good guys, the Indians were the savages and the bad guys. But who were the savages? The Indians were living here, and they got wiped out just to take over their land. So when revolution is spoken of, and the brutality, the United States was founded on brutality. Brutality against the Mexicans who lived here indigenously, the Native Americans who lived here indigenously, and then finally the Africans who were brought over here. And the only reason why we probably weren't wiped out was because we needed, we served a purpose financially.
Yeah.
And people don't realize it all boils down to money, right? It all boils down to money. The reason why America is great, and listen, everybody, the reason why America is so-called great is because America was built on the backs of Black labor. It was built on the backs of free slave labor. It's the same thing you see in China. China does all of the manufacturing, or the large majority of the manufacturing in the world, because they have a very huge They have 1 billion people, and the majority of them come from very poor environments and can work for very cheap wages. Black slaves were working for free, selling tobacco, which is like a drug, to the rest of the world, as well as cotton. And we're the only people who could do the labor. So,
okay, so I'm going to get to some of these questions. We kind of answered this, but Shauna Brooks, Shauna Brooks, I think is what it is, wants to know, Ian Shauna Brooks, maybe. What did you think about the protests from New York, D.C., and California? This is what I feel. Again, I don't trust the media. I just don't. I don't. I'm sorry. I trust what I see, but I don't like the generalization that happens. What I will say this, we must have protests. Protest is crucial for advancement. I think in terms of riots, I'm never going to be someone who's going to say we need to riot. I don't think that's the route. But here's another thing. It wasn't blacks who were, I'm sure there were some blacks who were unruly, but from what I'm hearing and seeing from not just one source, but from all sources, it's Antifa, if I'm saying that right. But it's not blacks. So I don't want, I think it's important that we understand, because I don't want the narrative to be switched that when George Floyd died in a bad way, black people lost their mind and crushed all the cities and set us back. You know, that's not how it went down. And I think it's important that we share that and that we embrace that. Again, I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. I'm not trying to make you feel ashamed of the color of your skin. I'm just here telling you the facts. And again, I will never be anti-protest. We have to protest to get our voice heard. And I'm not just saying us as a black person. I'm saying any minority. That's the only way you could do it. You know, otherwise the majority thinks everything's just great.
exactly.
Anything you want to say real quick about protests?
Yeah. When I was younger, when I was in college, same age as a lot of the folks that are out there right now, and I can speak to the anger and the destruction and stuff like that. It was during the Rodney King trial. And when the cops were acquitted during the Rodney King trial, there were huge protests. I was living in Atlanta at the time. We protested, we rioted. And as a young person, the destruction comes out because you're seeing it. It's blatant. No one's listening to you. So many times the language that you use out of that frustration becomes destruction, especially when you're poor. You know, if you're poor and no one's listening to you and you keep telling them and telling them and telling them, at some point in time, it boils over. And when you get a group of people together with that mentality, it becomes explosive. Now, I'm not speaking to when you have other groups who are added into that, whose sole purpose is just to come in and be destructive and things like that and try to infiltrate the protests that are happening. But that anger is real. You know, that anger is real. And that, you know, TJ, it happened in LA and South Central, where it all got burned down. It got burned down in Watts riots in the 60s and burned down again in the 90s. So yeah, that anger is visceral.
Nicola wants to know, what do you want Donald Trump what do you think Donald Trump should do now?
Nothing. He's not going to do anything. Donald Trump is going to do the same thing he continues to do, which is maintain power. That's all he wants. He just wants to maintain power.
Okay. I got to play devil's advocate for the purpose of this discussion. That's what the media feeds you. That I don't believe it. That's what the media feeds you. What would you say to that?
So what I would say to that is, I was over. You could check my posts. I was riding by the White House and saw the Secret Service sniper teams coming in. More snipers. So in my mind, I was like, oh, wow, they must be preparing for maybe people overrunning the barricades and trying to go to the White House, but there are more snipers and they're going to be on these buildings. And then a few minutes later, the president walks out. They clear out the square where all the peaceful protesters were. They clear out the square, and the snipers were there because he was walking into that area. They clear out the square, use violent force to move them out just so he could take a photo op. Not, it would have been a whole different thing if he came to Lafayette Square, which is the park, and he tried to speak to the protesters. That would have been trying to bring people together. But instead, he cleared them out, a show of force, a show of power, to say, I can take over this space and I'm going to take this photo out. And there's nothing you can do about it. I'm going to walk back inside and boom, okay, go back to whatever you were doing.
Well, my answer to that, he's got to stop the divisive rhetoric. It does nothing good. It does nothing good at this point. And I agree with you, Julian. Here we go. What are some advice to give to teens who want to help the community?
Oh man, there's a lot of things you guys.
Let's try to get through these with it because there's a lot. So let's try to do one minute answers.
Get involved in your local politics. You might not be able to vote until you're 18, but you can start to support candidates who have your interest, but get involved in the community.
Okay. Well said. I think voting and understanding and respecting and sharing, and being willing. That's one thing I have to say. I'm very excited for the future. I shouldn't say excited, but I am excited. I think I give the youth a hard time a lot. I don't understand some of the choices they make in terms of who they listen to, what they watch. But the one thing I have to say is I'm kind of confident that they're going to make a big change. They're not seeing, they're kind of so confused of how this can happen. And they're very strong. So I'm getting kind of excited about that. Okay, here we go. This is a good one because I've heard this too. A lot of people, again, me playing devil's advocate, Black people need to stop using this as a crutch. There's many minorities, races that have had bad things happen to them, and they don't seem to keep coming back to the past. So that's, again, devil's advocate question. How would you answer that before we get to the specific of this question?
Once again, I think we sort of answered a lot of that when we talked about systemic racism. The United States is almost it's like in the Matrix, right? So a lot of people are blinded to what's actually happening because they are not affected by systemic racist practices. So if you go into a bank and you're used to getting a loan, then you don't see that there are other people who don't get a loan because of certain things. If your name is Jason Smith, you don't realize that if your name is Tyrone Williams and you have the same exact credentials, that more than likely you are probably going to get the job position, and Tyrone Williams' resume isn't even looked at because he's already discriminated against because his name is Tyrone Williams. So it's not that Black people are complaining. We're trying to tell you what's actually happening. It's your privileged ears that don't want to hear that and hear it as complaining.
My thing is this. I think a lot of minority groups, Mexicans, Indian, Native Americans, Asians, I believe all minorities have to suffer some type of unfairness. But I truly feel Black unfairness is at the height, is at the first in line for various reasons. Number one, I think I don't want to say it like this, but I guess I'm not going to really take time to think of it. But in a way, in a position of power, who would be the first threat? If I wanted to be greedy with how I feel things should be in this country, and I'm a white male who believes I should be in control, who is my biggest threat? What nationality? It's got to be black. I mean, let's be honest. The culture, pop, the music, at sports, there's a lot. Blacks have a lot of power and say. So I'm not going to say that there's someone sitting in a political position that's just waiting to, belittle. But what I will say is, in Georgia or at other, I hate to mention it, but I will. There's many other places, but in Georgia, those two men who shot Arbery the way they did, there's something behind that. Whether their little sister liked the way, whether their little sister liked the Kendrick Lamar song or something agitated them.
They hunted that man down. I read accounts. I read account where a white classmate of the son went to high school with this guy and said he was probably one of the most racist people he's ever seen. And he said that there was a running joke that, oh, I might be racist or a little biased, but I'm not like him. So they hunted that man down, which is why the gentleman who was filming also was arrested. And matter of fact, if you go back to that footage, when the camera, he's filming Arbery, when the camera goes out of frame for a second, the reason it goes out of frame is because the gentleman who's following is cocking his pistol. Go back and watch it, and when you see it go out of frame, you hear a handgun being cocked. That's why he got arrested. So, it's crazy out here.
I just feel that's important to say, because I've heard a lot of people, and again, this is the narrative. This is the muting that goes on that is very difficult to deal with. This is all lives matter. This is, you shouldn't take a knee, it's disrespectful. This is that way of neutralizing the struggle, because
it's the butts.
It's the butts. Exactly.
It's the, okay, but like when people say, like you and I had this quick conversation, TJ, when people say all lives matter, okay, if someone says save the whales, does that mean screw all the other fish in the sea? No one ever says save the whales and somebody else raises their hand and say, oh, well, what about the dolphins and the tuna and all? No one does that. It's only when we talk about blacks that there is a nerve that's set off.
So, and again, and I want to keep saying this because I have to show a lot of respect to anybody who's in here who is white, who's trying to understand. And it may be uncomfortable, but this is an honest conversation, and this is how we feel. And I think it needs to be heard. And I respect you for being here and listening.
Ooh, I see a good one. Hold on. So,
can you pin it?
Huh?
Can you pin it?
Can I pin it? Let me see if I can. No, it only makes me want to report it.
Okay, so go ahead and tell me read it out, and then I'll find it.
Beauty by Kalia. What advice can you give someone who asks, why did you go to a HBCU? I graduated from one, and I've been asked many times. I will answer that because it was a very, I went to a school very much like TJ's.
Well, time out.
Yeah.
Why are people asking, why did you go?
She actually went to a HBCU, and she says that she gets asked that all the time.
But that's my question. Why does she get asked that? That's a problem right there.
It's problematic. It's the same question when people say, well, why do all the black kids sit at the same table together, right, during lunch at school? So let me explain why I did that. I went to a school very much like TJ's school, where it was a very wealthy private school in the suburbs, Baltimore County. And there were always times where I had to, and my friends, other black students, had to constantly explain the black experience, right? So we would have these debates with our white friends, et cetera, trying to help them understand the black experience, because they would say a lot of these same things that we think are ignorant. So by the time I wanted to go to college, I didn't want to have to waste time with that. I did not want to have to keep explaining what it's like to be black in America. So I chose to go to Morehouse so that I could just focus on my studies and not be sidetracked by ignorant, remarks here and there and things of that nature.
All right. Well, again, like I said, I didn't know you would get asked that question. My mind doesn't go there. And I think a lot of white Americans would say, why would you get asked that question and why does it affect you? But I can understand. Well, you want to answer that or you want me to?
Well, a lot of people also think HBCUs are inferior schools. So a lot of times they say, well, why would you go there? Like you could have gone to Harvard, you could have gone here. Why would you go there? That's how it's asked. Why would you go there? It's a condescending thing. So, I'm proud of it. I love my school.
I'll tell you what, my very first time being at an HBCU campus, I think it was my first time, and I don't want to get called out and show a picture of 96 when I'm 16 years old at one. But the first time I remember was just last year with you at Morehouse. And I felt a really great sense and to the point where I was like, I want to send my kids here. I honestly did. And I don't know if that will happen. But I hate to say this and it's kind of heartbreaking, but I felt home. It was very, very empowering.
It's liberating.
Okay, Julian, let me ask you, this is another good question. Marlene wants to know, I don't get what makes someone racist. Is it education? Ooh. Is it fear? So again, we're going to try to limit it to 1 minute so we can get through as many.
I'm going to make it quick. So someone even said this in the comments. No one is born racist or bigoted, right? So it's passed down from their parents and it's really fear. It's fear of the unknown. If you do not have any black friends or friends of other races and you don't know them, then you have this implicit bias that's been taught to you, right? And you're afraid of them. And this is what happens actually in a lot of cases of police brutality. They don't understand the people that they're coming into contact with and they're scared of them. And that's why they pull a gun on them first and have such a brutal response to these people that they're coming into contact with. So for example, if you move and build a house in the woods, right? And you see a grizzly bear come by your house, you grab your gun and you shoot the bear. You're like, oh my God, I'm fearful of the bear, but you don't take into account that you moved into the woods. And that's where the bear lives, right? The bear is not a scary creature. It's just that you are not familiar with that, that interaction. So people just have to, it's fear. It's all fear.
I love this question. Xmas61 asked, if you could sit down with the president, what would you say to him? Nothing off limits.
I've met the president before, but go ahead, TJ. Go ahead and do your thing.
I'll keep it quick because I want to keep through all these questions. What I would say, first of all, you go.
I've met him before, and he is plain and simple acting.
That's what I keep hearing.
This guy was a New York Democrat. Jared Kushner, huge Democratic supporter. His daughter, huge Democratic supporter. This guy is night and day from who he was because he understood in order to win the presidency, I have to play the people. Donald Trump has always been playing the media forever to sway different things.
You know what I don't understand is, and again, first of all, let me answer this question. If I could sit down with the president, what would you say to him? Nothing off limits. I would ask him to please think before he speaks, think before he tweets, to let him know there's people who have been wronged, whether it's directly because of him or not. There's people that have been wronged in our lives, and you have to be sensitive to that. And I'm not going to go here and say, when you said looters and shooters, it was taken from the 60s from a racist. I'm not going to even go down on that route because there's a countless examples of him seeming like he's borrowing from very racist places that we are aware of, that many people aren't. So it's like this. It's like if I'm at a zoo and there's a big lion behind me who's locked up in a cage, and there's a field of people outside watching me interact with this lion. And I'm trying to tell you, I can't let this lion out because he will go crazy, but the lion's calm. But what you can't see from a distance is every time I'm poking him with a knife. So the lion will roar because he's pissed, he's locked up and he's pissed off. So I feel like that is what is happening. And I'm not saying, again, it doesn't matter of the politics. I just feel there's like a stroking going on, and I don't watch the news. This isn't from the news feeding me this. This is from things I read from his tweets when he's very divisive. And that is an issue, whether you love his policies or not, because I don't really know his policies. I don't go down that route. Maybe I will, but that's not me. What I don't like is the rhetoric, the message, the way the message gets said. It's dividing this country and setting us back and causing serious issue.
Yeah.
It's dangerous, as someone said on The Dangerous. So that's what I would say is you have to chill out. And even just 5-10 years ago when he was on The Apprentice, his whole personality was so much different. He was calm. He would listen to different sides. He would let people debate. It was very chill. And now what he projects is this opposite being where he's very me or you. You're this, you're that. It's name calling. I didn't see that. Even when he fired people, he was very calm about it on The Apprentice. He would say, unfortunately, because of this, you're fired. Very calm. But now it's like it's steering, and that's a serious issue.
And just me answering that question, I wouldn't say anything. I would sit there silent. And I'm saying, like, he's supposed to be meeting with me. He knows, like, I'm the main person he's meeting with. I would be silent. And you know why? Because when you're silent with people, it actually gives you more power because they can't read you. They don't know what you're saying. And they end up trying to scramble to placate to you. And there's nothing to say to someone like him because he has already had his mind made up about the things he wants to do. So sometimes silence can be very powerful.
Yeah. And we answered this in the last live, but I want to touch on this because it's very important. Lena asked, should more be done in schools to teach kids from a young age about racism and the importance of equality? 100%. As I started out the prior one, I think this is the biggest issue. Not only the funding and how certain areas in our country and our state have more funds to make a better school and to give other kids, usually rich kids, a better opportunity. But what is mandatory in terms of what is studied is wrong, in my opinion. We need to understand more about racism and our true history before we need to learn about biology. There's no reason why I have to graduate and learning about biology, but I don't have to learn about slavery. And I don't want to hear, we do touch on this. No, we need to dive in a hard way. We need to learn about every little figure, not just dates, not just sentences, not just thesis. We need to go into these people's lives and feel what they felt. And until the education system does that, to me, I'm very concerned. Besides voting, I think voting is huge. And I think that is huge because it's going to take the next generation to get us to where we need to be. And that's voting and the school system.
Definitely.
There was one person who asked, what do we think the U.S. can learn from other countries?
Oh, let me speak on that real quick.
Real quick. Go ahead. Hit it.
Do we, if we have any Swiss people here, please let me know if I'm correct. From what I understand, the Swiss government, which is also a democratic government, is actually flipped upside down from the United States. And what I mean by that is the United States is a top-down sort of power structure, right? Where from what I understand in Switzerland, it's more of a bottom-up power structure, which means that the folks in the local political community have more power over what happens than the president. We're here in the United States, the federal government has the majority of the power and can kind of dictate what's happening in the states. So I think actually I like that model and politically.
I think when I hear the question, what can the U.S. learn from other countries? I think we can learn a lot from Germany. Again, I didn't see if it was confirmed, but I had heard that they take it very serious, their past. They do a year of studying on it. They have no flexibility for those who shine or try to exemplify their
Yeah.
darkest time. And I think that's the way to handle it.
Someone said it's illegal. Someone in the chat said it's illegal.
And
That
here's
Nazi
this is the
flag.
issue. So it's illegal in Germany to I guess promote Nazism or Nazis or anything like
Yep.
that. But here in the States, we would say it's our freedom to be able to say whatever we want. That's what the America's built on. Fine.
Hey,
If Kaepernick takes a knee, you can't
Yeah.
get mad. And
But
as
check
the
this out.
president who understands that, you can't get angry like that at him. So
Yeah,
you're playing two ways.
but take it a step further, TJ. What if Berlin had statues of Adolf Hitler and other notable figures like we do here of Stonewall Jackson and all of these Confederate figures from the war? We've got lots of monuments to all these Confederate leaders. That just would not stand in Germany.
So this is my opinion, and I've already said this. I don't go to those places where I have to see Confederate heroes and statues and monuments, and I don't have to walk past them. I do have to deal with some things I don't like on the dollar bill, but I guess I'm numb to that. That's just whatever. But my point is, at one point we have to make a decision whether we're going to be so protective of freedom or we're going to do the right thing when freedom sometimes may not be the right thing.
Yeah.
Or lead us to the right thing.
Yeah.
Um,
And a lot of times, while you're pulling up the next one, a lot of times people think Black people are so sensitive about stuff. If you heard everything that we could pick at, then you would really think that we were sensitive. We only bring up a few topics.
and
we don't bring up everything.
I'm happy you mentioned this because editing the video I did, the 400 years with Omar, was incredibly difficult. I had to show Black Wall Street through one picture, that whole time period. Otherwise, I would have had to taken out other important pictures and other important moments. I'm not going to cut out when MLK is shot or when Arbery is shot or when Eric Garner is saying I can't breathe. I don't know what to cut out. I could have made that video 10 minutes long and equally as effective.
Yep.
I honestly could have. There's still pictures that I have that were pulled that I felt like I should have gotten this one in. People where a man is looking at a sign saying hiring now, white only. That's a powerful picture that I didn't get to include in here. There's a picture where there's a bunch of people, Black people, holding signs, let me vote, let me vote. This isn't even that long ago.
Right.
And there's a white cop standing there like kind of mocking it in a way. I could have went so many different directions. So
for sure.
To me, it can't be uncovered. It can't be unpacked in a month. It has to take a full year when you're at a level to comprehend and have serious conversations.
Yes.
It should be mandatory in high school.
It definitely should be. And by the way, to all the people who say, oh, that was then and it's not now, what do you think all this voter suppression stuff is about? Every time there's an election, the Republicans they don't want people to do mail-in voting. They want people to show an ID when they vote. They create all of these things as obstacles for minorities to vote because they know the numbers are there that minorities could run them out of office.
And again, I'm not a political person, so I can't add too much about it. But the fact that voting isn't a national holiday when everyone is off to go vote is an issue. Because most minorities, at least Black minorities, are working paycheck to paycheck. They can't afford to take a day off. While many whites who may be in a position to ask off or get off or whatever, to not even show up that day. That is a serious issue. So the voices of all aren't being heard. We can make a holiday for that. We could change one of those holidays that we get around the clock calendar to take a day off. We can change one for voting. It's the most
Columbus Day.
important day of the next 2 to 4 years.
We can get rid of Columbus Day and make that the voting
Voting day.
holiday.
I just and when those things don't happen, to me it speaks very loudly. It's majority people who aren't taking this serious enough to make sure it's really an open forum for everyone to speak and to make their voice heard.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay, and I had a text up of Roots, and I will say this, that I saw Roots for the first time a couple of years ago, and I strongly recommend everyone to watch it. I've seen a lot of people talk about how it's changed their life. Frances always tells me how that changed her life. I'm not going to put her on blast and tell her exactly what she said, but she did say it changed her life, and I watched it and it changed my life. Yeah. So at the very least, start with the series Roots, and just try to understand. I would never ask you to think the way I think, but if you don't, if it's important to you to be together forward, then try to understand how we think.
And let me touch on that. Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
You have to listen to the minority. You have to listen to the minority. It's only the right thing to do to be in a position of majority. It's like you can't run a great company if you're the only one you're going to listen to. No, you have a whole team of people you listen to. And that's what makes great companies great. You listen. For sure. A basketball team has a coaching staff that he listens to. He has players that he invites to discuss. You got to have those open discussions if you're really going to be serious.
Yes. And I saw Roots when it came out, and I was a little kid. And TJ, the reason why you didn't see it back then as a kid is because you probably were literally just born when it came out. So one thing about that too, and also about education, the American education system only teaches us anything about Black people. The only thing we learn is slavery, which has got to be the most demeaning thing as a young Black kid sitting in a classroom. And the only thing you see every time it came time to be taught about slavery, I hated history. I hated history. And you have to imagine, especially if you're a Black kid that goes to a predominantly white school, at some point in time, some little smart ass kid is going to turn around and think it's funny, and they're going to say, ha ha, my grandfather owned your grandfather. And they think it's a joke. And that's the kind of stuff, because when we learn those things, and it's such an embarrassing thing to have to go through in a history class as a young defenseless kid, like you're fourth grade, third grade, whatever it is. It's such a demeaning thing that it has to be deliberate. It just really has to be deliberate.
So this is a question from Je suis magnifique. It sounds very French. But I'm going to assume it's an American, maybe not, maybe it's French. What do the younger gen of Jacksons know about what we as Blacks have endured regarding racism? And I'm happy you asked this question. I don't take offense to it. This is why I'm putting it up. I grew up, like I said, in a predominantly white neighborhood. I didn't have to worry about my lights getting cut off. I didn't have to worry about my next meal. But that doesn't mean I didn't experience racism. Maybe not to the level you have, but I have experienced it. I've experienced it going to the market. I've experienced it, and maybe not as much as you, but I still have experienced it. I can change maybe, where I'll be, what city I live in, sure, but I can't change my color, and I don't want to change my color of my skin. And therefore, that makes me just as much Black as you. Now, on top of that, which I always try to take the high road in, my career was affected in very racist ways. I'm not trying to complain. I don't want to complain. But when I go to radio stations here, if I want to have the #1 song in the world, I got to go through a certain way. I got to go through a certain channel. I can't just all of a sudden wake up and have the biggest stations in the city play me. That's not, they want to see you go through they want to see you get proven in one realm first before they play your music. To be
Urban
clear,
radio.
you got to go through urban radio. I can make the most pop song, but because if it's not number one in urban, it ain't getting played on pop. That's not what everyone else has to deal with. So I do endure it. I do suffer it. Maybe not the same way that most do, but don't think I don't experience it.
And to add on to that, TJ, a white artist could then cover your song and go directly to pop radio, where you
and
are
take my
relegated
song.
over here.
And I will share this, you guys, and I go back and forth with this, but I'm going to share it. You know, let's be honest. The Jackson 5 were huge. Their first 4 songs went number 1 on the pop charts. They were huge. Next thing you know, there are 5 black brothers, right? What happened after that? 5 white brothers became big.
The Osmonds.
The Osmonds. I'm nothing against the Osmonds. From everything I know, they are beautiful, loving people. But let's be honest. Without the Jackson 5, there would be no Osmonds.
Wouldn't be
Let's
Osmonds.
be honest. And I'm going to bring it back because this is where I want to go. And this is where I say my family taught me more than anything. I remember when 3 brothers were coming out. We are excited. We are coming out. I remember seeing my uncle stare into nothing. And I asked him, what are you thinking about? What are you thinking about? He would say, you guys are going to be more successful outside of your own country. And I can't believe that. It's like it hurt him. He was right. He said, and on top of that, there's going to be a group of 3 brothers that are going to dominate the charts. Do you guys want to guess who that group is? Hanson. Right after us.
Yep.
3 brothers. And I'm not trying to hate on anyone. I'm just trying to let you know how this system can work. And again, no sympathy here. Don't feel bad for me. Many more of my people have it 100 times worse than I do. So I don't want sympathy. I just want you guys to understand it's not just ending when you get to a certain point. I do wish other celebrities of black people would do more, would reach back further. I do wish that. But maybe this will change that. Maybe this is what had to happen. And I'll never say the passing of George Floyd was a good thing, but it's really helped a lot of this come out and get mentioned in the front, and hopefully we can go forward. You know?
Yeah.
So
and go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Jay.
So there was a couple brothers got smart, like Maurice Starr, and when he when New Edition got hot, he knew that there was going to be a white version of New Edition that would come out, but he controlled the narrative and he created New Kids on the Block. So he, black man created New Kids on the Block, became massively, larger than New Edition at the time, and even spawned the Backstreet Boys and all those guys, and folks who were down with Maurice Starr ended up with NSYNC and some of those groups. But yeah, man, it's so blatant how it happens.
Jay, you see any other questions?
Actually, someone in the comments, and I actually answered it, have brought up how a lot of parts of of Black history and the critical contributions Blacks have made are not even covered. So, for instance, Alexander Graham Bell. Not Bell? The one who invented the light bulb.
Thomas Edison.
Thomas Edison, who's supposedly one of the greatest American inventors. He couldn't get the light bulb to stay on more than 13 minutes. It was a black man who worked with him named Lewis Latimer who created the filament that allowed the light bulb to stay on longer. And without Lewis Latimer on that team, we wouldn't have light bulbs.
There you go. Yeah. All right. CC ask, is it wrong that I choose not to protest with a sad face? I love this question, CC. And again, I'm always going to be inviting. I personally think you should do some type of protest. That's just my opinion. I don't, if you're not feeling anything, then I guess you shouldn't. But I will warn you on this: by not having your voice heard, it's kind of a sign of being complacent, being okay with how everything is happening. Yeah. So I do suggest that. I strongly suggest that. I'll never tell you what to do. And I just think, put it this way: I think if you watch some of our history, I think you'll choose to protest. So the answer to that question is no, it's not wrong, but you need to listen and see other people's history to, and I think that, look, that's what, like I said, it wasn't George Floyd's passing that got me here. I cannot promote. I pushed back my video that was supposed to come out the end of last week because wait, what day are we on? Thursday. It was supposed to come out today.
Yeah.
I can't promote anything. I can't talk about anything else. This is dominating my mind. And it took me, again, it wasn't the George Floyd, that exact incident. It was me diving into the history, me learning, me seeing everything coupled with what is going on. That sparked where I'm at now. And I honestly don't feel I'm going to get to the point where I want to promote anything for another week or two. I'm going to slowly get to that point. But right now, this is important to me because I saw it. I spent 2 days researching. I called you many times. I called my father many times. I called other men who've been asking them questions. I went online. I watched YouTube video after YouTube. I looked up pictures. I tried to read both sides.
Definitely.
It's disheartening. And when you've experienced that, that's what propelled me here. So is it wrong that you choose not to protest? I'm not going to say that, but I will ask you to really, if you care about making a difference, to understand more. And again, it starts with, and this is one more thing. On YouTube, you guys, when I posted 400 years, the video I came out with yesterday, I have a whole link of videos that I saw. It's going to take maybe an hour or two to watch it all, but that should change. That will, if you watch that, I think you will protest.
Definitely. And while TJ's looking for the next question, I'm going to give you another little Black history moment. Dr. Charles Drew, who created blood transfusions, the irony and craziness about the Black experience in the U.S., Dr. Charles Drew was in a car accident, was bleeding out, needed a blood transfusion, which he invented the process of how you transfuse blood. He was denied admission to a hospital because he was Black and died because he could not get a blood transfusion.
Okay, I saw a question about asking, do I think that the police officers... Ooh, that's... Groovy wants to know, do I think there's a problem? Let's keep this short. Do I think there's a problem with police officers themselves or the laws that they enforce?
It's the culture. It's all right. Let me back up. It's not even the culture. It's what has been perpetuated by the government. The government, and when Richard Nixon was in office, placed an emphasis on policing because Richard Nixon did not like what was happening with the hippie movement and the Black Power movement. So he wanted to squash that, which is where the war on drugs came into play. From that point on, we've had mass incarceration. We've had the militarization of the police force. So it's really that the police have been empowered to basically do whatever they want to do. So if you have people in those jobs who are not the most balanced and don't know how to de-escalate, which is what they are supposed to do, then you end up with a mob mentality from the police force where they feel that they're above the law and can do whatever they want to. And it's also supported by a judicial ruling. So let me just say this really quick, TJ. with the Rodney King trial, right? And this also goes to systemic racism. With the Rodney King trial, that trial should have happened in South Central LA. The prosecutors argued, the defense attorneys argued that they would not get a fair trial because the piers, the place where it happened, would be majority black. So they asked for a change of venue, and it was granted, and it was moved to a white suburb where the majority of the people on the police force lived. And that is totally unjust and fair. And those cops were acquitted, and that's why you had riots from there.
Real quick, why the racist people have the violence in them hearts? I think, like I said, I think a lot of our country it's okay to be isolated from other nationalities, and I think there's no true desire to learn and sympathize with everyone else. And I think there's a wrong message of, blacks are just using it as a crutch. There's affirmative action. There's this, there's that. I don't want to hear anymore. And I think that's the wrong thing, because it's agitating them. And again, this is where I blame a lot of and I'm trying to be right. I'm trying to be nice, you guys. There's obviously some people that are just taught it. I put it on my post where the young girl's getting a black doll and she freaking has a cow. She goes crazy like it's like it was the worst thing that could have happened to her. That is just taught, But I think for the most part, for those who aren't having those blatant experiences, you have to consciously go after learning about others. You have to consciously decide you want to learn about you. You have to. If you don't, it's just going to bubble up into you not even realizing it. Like, a lot of people don't realize the privilege that a lot of whites have. Yeah. I'm trying to be PC because I truly feel it's more than a lot of whites. Yeah. It is a whole general thing.
Now, T, I want to answer this because it's specifically saying why racist people have this violence in their hearts. It's because the racist folks, a lot of the overtly racist people are actually poor people. And they have been lied to and told that black people are stealing things, or black people want to rape your women. They want to do all these things. So it instills this fear and this anger against black people because they think that black people are going to perpetuate violence against them. And in recent years, those same people have been fed a narrative that Mexicans are coming in and taking your jobs. So we got to build this wall. So now all that racist energy has been pointed towards Mexicans. So that's all it is, because the power structure still wants to keep those white folks in control who are poor. And someone in the comments asked what year racism started. It was 1619. Yeah. And the reason why poor whites, well, we can go into this at another point in time, but if you study Bacon's Rebellion is the exact point when racist policies here started. And it was because poor whites, poor blacks, and enslaved blacks all were fighting together against the government and the power structure. And they wanted to break that up. So they said to the poor whites, hey, you guys can be like us. You're different than them, so you shouldn't mix with them. And they created a lot of policies around that, which if you read it, you can go into detail around that.
Okay, we're going to close up because I don't want it to just stop. But Toria mentioned American History X. One of my, I haven't seen it in years, but it's a very powerful movie with Edward Norton. I used to love it. I still do love it, I'm sure. But it was a very impactful movie when I saw it many years ago. So that's another one I think is cool to watch, is American History X. I will close with this, you guys. Again, I always want this to be as open as possible. I don't want it to feel like I'm ganging up on certain people. I don't want people to be ashamed of who they are, embarrassed. I just want people to be more open and understanding to what is going on, and the real issues that we in here in the States have. That's why I call the 400 years America's ugly truth, because I'm trying to bring it in the front. We can't sugarcoat that. But it's very important that you know you are loved. I love you. Um, I'll never want to make you feel that way, because I know it can't be easy, you know. And again, it's that process of putting a mirror up to who our people were. And the other thing I want to say is this has happened. This whole thing, this whole George Floyd movement, in my opinion, happened because of COVID, us being locked in, nowhere to go, no distractions. A ridiculous amount of people lost their job or staying home from jobs, so we're all locked in. That, in combination, we cannot forget Breonna Taylor, but what was more well known was Ahmaud Arbery. The way he was shot, the way how the county refused to bring charges, it took months of something that is so blatant, and we're just finding out that there was an alleged usage of a racial slur while it's happening. Someone saying that he was hit before he got killed by a truck. So that is all coupling together. Remember, this is within a month's time, and we're all focusing on that. So if we're not going to change it at this moment when we're all locked in, it's not happening. Which is, I should say that. This is the time. And that is why, for me, I don't feel comfortable talking about my music right now. I don't feel comfortable talking about other things. This is the time. There will be much more time for that, whether it's in a week, whether it's 2 weeks. But right now, my heart and mind is on this topic. And I'm going to do my part in trying to get everyone to understand that until our school systems make it mandatory, until we vote and have more diversity in office. That is the answer to me. But again, I love you guys. Jay, you want to close up with anything?
Hey man, I echo everything that you said, and I think everyone should embrace this moment right now. They need to, do everything that they can, because this really is probably the most pivotal moment and the biggest opportunity that we've had for change. So do everything that you can, guys. Do everything that you can.
Cool. All right. Much love again. Thank you guys for watching. Whether you watch 5 minutes, whether you watch the 2 hours, I hope you learned something. I hope you're inspired. But much love to you, and we'll get dancing and stuff in a week or two. That ain't going nowhere. But for right now, let's unify and build a better future.
We love y'all.
All right. Thanks, y'all.